And I think what's so interesting here too is a matter of like, if someone say was at $65 per hour, they'd literally be making $5 per hour in profit, which is about 8 to 9% profit margins. But what's crazy is if they could just get that rate from 65 to 70, they would literally double their profits. And that's Absolutely. What's always so amazing about the home service industry is that raising your prices, despite what we think about price sensitivity of people in the market, despite that, if you're able to get enough value to where you can raise price by just $5 an hour, you could literally double your profits. And so that is the importance of knowing these. Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
And we talk about it a lot. And I think we both do on a lot of our Facebook or YouTube videos is non-emotional data. It takes the emotion out of it. You literally like, it is what it is. Are we going to run with this? For a whole different other conversation too, underneath here is like the little formula we do when we do CRM setups such as Copilot. When we talk about labor burden, FICA unemployment, workman's comp, those are some things as the job costing reporting develops into Copilot. This is a number that you're also going to want to know because you're going to want to know what the hourly rate is loaded with labor burden for regular time and overtime. So that's another number we could definitely talk about at a later time. But at a bare minimum, Mike, for today's conversation, going into matrices, the bare minimum is you really need to know this break even. If it's a larger company, like 3 to 5 million, a little bit bigger, we may want it per division. But right now, if you're 4 to 5 million or below, this number probably will suffice. Construction, design, build projects may be the anomaly because your workman's comp and some of the stuff is extremely high there. But like I said,
what I like about this, Mike, is that fact that like someone can just literally take last year's P&L and figure this out. It doesn't take projections or time motion studies or like complexity. And maybe there's a little bit of accuracy that's given up in that. And so like, I just want to warn people getting it done. And I believe this is 98, 99% of the way there is far better than just not doing it at all. And that's what I see so many times people doing, because I've seen some illustrations and some examples where you're breaking down the cost of the fuel inside of every single trimmer. You're breaking down the cost of the tires and the brakes. And it gets so convoluted and complex to where when the data gets spit out, it's like, well, you literally had 500 data points you could have messed up on. If you fudged them all by 10%, now all of a sudden the number at the end doesn't make sense. Yeah. And so I like the fact that it's simple. I think the one thing is, would this be a little bit difficult to implement in terms of projecting going forward if you were changing what type of services you were offering? For example, going from more project-based to recurring, could that potentially, for the people that might be doing that in their business, throw a monkey wrench in this slightly in terms of running projections?
You could forecast off of it. It's significantly better than not having anything at all. And, for a whole different talk, we could go into that more as a multiple header recovery system. But Mike, you nailed it. There's about 8 different tabs. There's about 15 to 20 things in each tab. And in that, first draft's better than no draft. This is going to get you within 25 cents to maybe 50 cents an hour. But we've compared this to some of the industry consultants and literally sometimes within 15 to 20 cents an hour. And that's anomaly based on all those data points in those sheets. This is going to get you there. And the idea is now we have this non-emotional data to get into those matrices inside the software or the Excel sheet. And now we're pricing without emotion.
Right. And I think so far we've kind of built this 3 tiers of like information that's required. Number one, we need to be able to make sure that we have a clean P&L. Like the numbers we're pulling from here, the inputs require you to have a good P&L. That is like your personal expenses are separate from the business expenses. You're categorizing things correctly. That's the first layer of information. The next layer, based upon a good P&L, we're able to now figure out what our materials are, what our subcontractor costs are, what our total man hours are. So let's assume another piece of inputs that is important to get eventually now to the most important question is, how do we use this to actually create estimates where we don't ever lose our shirt on the job? And really, what do we need to break out for an estimate and create a solid estimating system?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you're really at a bare minimum, you're looking at your labor. So really what you're charging per hour and your break even. You have your product with your product markup. And depending if you're heavy project based, you may have your equipment. Now, depending on how you formulate this, that's where that multiple overhead recovery system may come into play, because you're going to capture your labor, your equipment, and then general administrative costs and 3 different multiple overhead recoveries. But for this example, if it's not built into this, and let's say we're renting a skid steer or dingo for a one-off project, we can build the equipment in. So labor, product, and equipment.
Got it. Cool. And so do you have an example kind of this in action in terms of an estimate or a job being done where you can see kind of how this figuring out the break-even numbers and figuring out all this data kind of kind of bring it full circle?
Yeah. So I've got a job costing example of an actual completed job. Or do you want me to actually go in and actually build this service out and show you an example of how these numbers pull into the actual job itself?
Let's do the completed one. Then we'll kind of fill in the gaps as we go along.
All right. So I'm going to shrink this down just a little bit here. But up top, we've got a mulch installation job. So this is kind of the back of the napkin job here. But we've budgeted here 10 hours of, or budget of 10 yards of mulch here. So as we put this in, we've got 10 yards. We believe in an industry standard for one guy or girl. It's about 1 hour per yard installed, labor, materials, labor and cleanup. Our product costs, we're going down to the wholesaler down the street. Each yard of mulch is costing us $38. And our product charge right here is $47.50. So we're marking it up from $38 to $47.50 a yard. Those were our assumptions as we went to look at this job. Does that make sense on a high level, Mike, before I kind of dive into it?
Makes sense.
Okay, and I can bump this out. So what you're going to see in hopefully the software, I built this out in an Excel sheet. So each software is going to show it a little bit different, but you're going to have the client name, Old Acme Inc. We did a mulch install. So crew number 1 here, I got Mike A and Mike C, both about the same height and size. So we were going to power through this one. Low center of gravity, we've got those wheelbarrows and shovels. But we clocked into the job, Mike, both together on the job together. At 8 a.m., we left at 5:15 and we had an hour break. So we had, math is eluding me here, but about 9 hours and 45 minutes, or a little bit. So about 9 hours and 25 minutes after our lunch break. We budgeted this job for 10 hours based on the 10 yards. Well, Mike, apparently one of us was a little bit slow that day. We were out there, but it actually took us 10 hours and 15 minutes each to do that. So the total hours was 10.5 or 20.5 hours. So as you're clocking in and out of a software, you're just manually adding this in Excel sheet. We're taking the actual time on the job minus any breaks. And we were budgeted 10 and we were almost double the budgeted hours. But I will tell you, in the lawn care company, this was not uncommon. If we've got A players or maybe sub A players, if we don't tell them how long it should take, they're going to take as long as they see fit. So right now, Mike, our variance is the difference over or under. So our variance right now is we're 10.5 hours over budget. Now, obviously, if it's costing us in the other example, almost $60 an hour, that's not good, right? Costs us an extra $600. So as we scroll through the sheet here, the reporting in the software, the Excel sheet, depending on we send it out, would be, we have a total of 2 men and we're budgeted for 10 and it took us 20. So we're over budget by 10.5. Our labor rate, so this is how we're going to set up the reporting, is we want to look at our labor and our product with product markup. So our labor rate that we were charging is $17.54 and our overhead cost was $6.05. This is what we did. So the difference between those would be our profit, and we had our actual product cost and what we charged for the product. So it cost us $9.50. We charged $11.87. The total job was $22,930, Mike. So
how did you come up with the budget overhead cost on that one? I know we kind of glanced through some of that there.
So we took the 20.5 hours and times our break even. In this example, it was actually $65 here.
Got it.
So once we have that, in this example here, we budgeted 10 yards. Well, the reporting, we're also probably gonna look, how many yards do we actually use? Well, we budgeted that job to be an inch, but they went out and did it about 2.5 to almost 3 inches. So they've overdone that. We had the dump truck full. They just kept going. So that's another possibility that can happen. So I'm not positive. I don't think that actual yards plays into this equation below. It was just really the labor. But I wanted to actually show you. Yeah, so the product here is identical, but this is another after effect that can happen here. So really, you may hit the budget hours, but they may use double the product. There's no tracking on that. But the idea here is, if we went in for this job, the actual here is on the left, but the budgeted was, we should have a 65% profit margin. So we're charging $17.42, and based on 10 hours times our $65 an hour break even, our cost is $605. So the profit on that would have been about $1,100. The product, we're charging $11.87. It's costing us $9.50. $237 was our profit. We had a 20% margin on that. So all in, we charged $25.55. expense was, I'm sorry, our product and expense was 1,500. So we should have netted bottom line profit about $1,300, 1,375. It's a 46% margin. So I didn't actually play with the yards of mulch here. As you can see, the 1187 here and the 20% identical. I'm just showing the effect of over budgeting with the labor. So literally, if you're looking at it, we should have cost us labor in 605. It ended up, since we were over budget, Mike, by almost double. It cost us 1,300. It's not terrible. We still made some money, but we were literally almost 40% less profit on the labor end. Products, we still had our margin, but what we did, we charged $2,900. Expense was 22. We made 647. What we did is we left a bottom line profit loss on the table of $727. So the software
is literally a doubling, but by going from 647 to what was projected at 1,300 would literally double the profit of the business.
Exactly. So on a very high level, there's things that we're looking at. We should have a good start and stop time from the crew, budgeted hours, how long it should take, and believe it or not, the software dollar amount. Because if you're doing like flat level billing, a lot of times people will kind of like not put a budgeted time or price depending on the software on the actual line item. But if we get good start and stop time, we get a budget time and a cost on the labor, and we have product and product markup with a budgeted quantity that we can check, you've got all the keys for the software, even an Excel sheet to track all this. And that's what this fictitious example is here of start and stop, budgeted times, and then what the actual was, and what was the total charge broken out. But you got those variables.
For the more cynical person, Mike, that looks at that and is like, okay, that's a bunch of math, and it's all looking in hindsight that I would actually get the math of the actual versus the budgeted. Can you speak to that person and hopefully convince them that not only is like the difference, obviously we saw the dollars at the bottom of the difference between budget and actual, but how is it actually going to make my crew work better, or how is it going to make me more accurate in the future? Because this is all just historical data that took me, let's just call it a few minutes or even 5 or 10 minutes if I'm doing it manually to actually get this information. Why is this information actually valuable?
Well, you're really flying in the dark. So on the first thing, financially, you need to make sure that you've got accurate numbers for your budget. So if we're going from $500,000 this year and we want to hit $1 million and we have a projected profit, if we don't know where we're going and how we're getting there and track it, we're never going to get there. But the secondary piece too is with the labor market right now. If you're hiring A players, Mike, they want to know what winning looks like. And this ties right in for the P4P system. And they want to know if they're winning on a daily or at least a weekly basis. Can you imagine going to a sports game, Mike, with no scoreboard? Those athletes aren't going to stick around so long. The crowd definitely isn't going to stick around because there's no scoreboard. So if you're sending your guys or girls out to mow lawns or put mulch in and you don't tell them how long it should take and what the parameters of success look like, they're going to probably do just what we fictitiously did. They're going to take 10 hours or 20 hours basically to put 10 hours worth of mulch in. And if we don't tell them how much product they should be using, they're just going to put it on and probably 3-inch depth instead of 1.5 inches to 1 inch top dress, and we may have bid. So it's going to give that clarity on the employee level. It's going to create a culture of consistency and driving towards that goal of profitability. And B, it's going to drive your financial success of your business. And now it doesn't live in the owner's head. Anybody can do it.
And I think by doing that for every service and every job using the software, it allows you to actually see which services are most profitable. Because let's say you pay someone $25 an hour or $20 an hour. Well, if they do 5 different services, if you actually run the job cost, you might realize that one of those services, you're at 40% profit. Another service, you're losing money on. But because you're average, you're 10, 15, 20% profit, like, hey, my business is doing fine. And maybe even that employee is efficient. But when you actually break it down based on every job and then break it out by services, like, oh my goodness, like I am making all of my profit in this one service. Maybe I should double down more on that. Or maybe I should raise prices on this other have a different labor rate for this other service that I'm losing my shirt on.
Yeah, exactly. We want to break it out per service or per division with the labor rate. The break even, as we took it as a general, as an average across. And the other thing that this data, if you've never seen it, looks probably overwhelming. But the cool part about it, Mike, is I can run this now at the end of the year, coming in November, December. And I'm going to probably suggest running the report again in probably July. We did it the week after 4th of July. But we're going to raise our prices, but we're not raising them. This may stir up some debate, which is okay. Drop your comments below. Happy to hear about it. But basically, we're not raising our price unless it's like fertilization and your product cost goes up 15%. That's a different story. But use the lawn mowing example. It's really basic. we're not raising our price by 3 to 5% each year, because really what we're doing is we're alienating our most profitable clients. And what I mean by that is if our goal now is $65 per man hour in this example we just showed, we're going to price everybody through the report that's below 65 up to where they need to be. But anybody above $65 an hour, we're leaving them there. So you've got clients you're making 100, 125 bucks an hour guaranteed. When you do that price increase as a across the board percentage, what you're really doing, in my opinion, is you're taking your most profitable clients and literally asking them to shop you. So very similar to Jack Welch and GE. He took the bottom 10%. We're non-emotionally taking the losers that aren't hitting your revenue goal. And we see it every time when we work with clients that like literally run this report. You're losing 20 bucks every time you show up to that launch. Just drop off a 20 and keep on going. It's going to be a lot quicker and easier.
What would you say to the person that is actually the opposite we've kind of inferred so far, which is people not getting into their numbers? For someone that's kind of OCD and gets really, really into the weeds of this stuff, for example, they're listening to what we just said and said, well, you know, you get budget hours and they're beating budget hours, but then because you drive 30 minutes outside of your route to go visit their property, you're actually not hitting your hourly rate and you're losing money. And this number is not showing me this because it looks like I'm beating budget hours. What would you say to the person that actually gets too much in the weeds? Because I've seen this subset of owners that literally spend so much time figuring these things out down to the penny that they actually don't focus on implementation of what this data is telling them.
Yeah, and you got to go deep and stay the course. You got to start with something to iterate off it. To answer directly kind of your question, and I think there's probably a few people watching this thinking the same thing with non-billable drive time. Like the cool thing is that rough break even that we built actually includes your non-billable drive time because it's from shop to shop. So if your non-billable drive time, as it goes up, as we grow, doesn't go over as a percentage, it is technically built into the $60 per man hour break even that we built out with your numbers. So long as that 30-minute drive is on average within the normal progression of growth as that percentage, it's okay. It's built in. Now we want to run some reports eventually when we have the acumen of direct labor costs on site and direct labor costs. That was that labor and labor burden from non-billable time to make sure that percentage is up. And as AI and different reporting continues to go, then we might be able to focus in on where do we need to build route density between the stops that don't have enough density.
Okay, I have two questions before we head out. One is for someone that has never done job costing, they might know their hourly rate. I think most people watching this, they know if I asked them, like, yes, I charge 70, or I charge 80, I charge 90. What would you say are the steps to go from that kind of guesstimating, and then at the end of the year, you kind of come up with your profit percentage? What would be the few steps you might give of the progression to go from that to actually knowing your numbers on every single job?
So if you're saying just basically knowing your numbers on every job as far as what you should charge, is that what you're asking?
Both that, but also being able to look back at the job and be able to actually see the breakdown like we saw of budgeted versus actual.
Yeah, so foundationally, we need to actually set up the service first with a budgeted time and cost. And once we have that, we can evolve into tracking the data. The other thing, depending on where you're at in the United States, Canada, Australia, doesn't matter, UK, we work with clients all over the world, but there is some seasonality pretty much, unless you're like southern Florida. But even there is some seasonality as far as production based on the season. So you need to at least have a statistical mean of 15 to 20 visits, like on a lawn mowing, because you're catching the lower production in the spring where double cut and blowing out. When things dry out in the summer, and then you kind of got somewhere in the middle in the fall. So we need to have a budgeted hour that we want to hit for our revenue goal, but we need to have a big enough statistical mean of data. Like 1 or 2 cuts is not going to be enough data to actually make that decision, especially the seasonality. Like shrub trimming, maybe 2 or 3 visits is going to be enough because it's going to average the first pruning where there's more heavy pruning, and then the second one is probably more of a maintenance pruning. So it's going to at least average them out, grab the high and low. But with mowing, things like that, even fertilization, you want to get at least 3 to 4 rounds in before you start to really have a knee-jerk reaction.
Very cool. And obviously, I think both you and I would agree that, you know, the software is really what makes this simpler and easier and more repeatable in someone's business. And, you know, SimpleGrowth is a fantastic resource for people to actually have it done for them inside their business, figuring out these numbers. At Copilot, we're launching job costing and price matrices December 1st. We're super excited about it. If someone has never done job costing in their software before, our goal is to try to make it where it's a little bit more appealing for the beginner to get started and then go deep on the numbers. Why what would you tell someone that has done software before, maybe have a big business, never done job costing or price matrices, but now they have the software, whether it be in Copilot or elsewhere, to be able to actually run these numbers? We're heading into the winter here, cutting edge. You're in the middle of November. We're rolling into December. Is this the right time? And when you see your clients coming into you, is this the time to actually take some time, figure out these numbers, put the numbers into the software? Like, what's that process of trying to figure out whether or not these numbers are accurate?
Yeah, so I don't know if you had some time, Mike, but I could, if you've got an extra few minutes, I can actually show you what I'd recommend. But kind of the old saying is, when do you plant a shade tree? Well, ideally 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Now. So yes, going into the winter season is the best time. If you're watching this, if it gets reproduced in a YouTube video or something, you're watching this in the middle of the summer and you don't have these numbers, do it. Take some time, get away from the office for an hour or two, whatever that looks like. And I'm actually, Mike, I'm going to break it down here. So obviously we help people do this, but in the mindset of abundance, I'm going to walk through how we would actually set this up in Copilot here in a fictitious example. But we've got a lawn mowing example, mulch installation, and shrub pruning. So the first thing you're going to want to do eventually is grab a variable, a custom field. But what I would do is, if we were working with Mike, you came to me as an Augusta franchise or just somebody else on the software, we would probably go in and take a list of all your services inside Copilot or whatever software you're using and take an inventory. But we would go in and break it in divisions. So for real simplicity here, minus my keyword, I'm going to say all these guys are going to fall in our maintenance division. Interesting enough, when we went to our financial break-even tab that Mike and I just went through, our break-even is $59.98 and we're charging $75 an hour. So what we've done is driven this in to $75 and $59 an hour. So that number has come down. Now, Mike, obviously, as people grow these softwares, kind of the mindset of abundance, I don't want to just give them the fish. I want to teach them how to fish. So the idea, Mike, is on a high level, people are doing this. Go build out your divisions. But that in your break even would go across each division. So we had fertilization, we had construction, but start to put these in the divisions that they're going to lay in as you're continuing to grow, because we've used this template up to companies at 33 million. So it's a scalable piece. But the idea on the most simplistic level, not to get the weeds completely, is we've got these three services and we're charging $75 an hour and our break-in is $59.98. So what we're going to do is go into division one, which is we've labeled our maintenance division. And those numbers 75 and 59 have come in, and I've done a little homework beforehand. So those are expenses. So this is a whole lot to look at, Mike, but I want to give a high level. So if you're going in, this is your blueprint. This is the blueprint to build the house. We're going to blueprint to build the service. So as we're going in, depending on the software and Copilot, this is very applicable. Our custom field type is either it's going to be a number. And the service type is going to be per unit. And the rate matrices calculation is quantity, rate times visits. Now I'm going to get into this in Copilot here in a minute, but I'm giving you the exact formula you need to do to set this up inside Copilot. Now, as we scroll over here, just because the screen's a little busy, kind of looks like somebody puked on it, let's be honest. With the yellow cells, we typed it in. So this is something we do hundreds of times a year. So this is scalable for my team. But we've got that lawn mowing service, Mike. So I've just copied that over. And as the business owner, we'll walk through if you're working with Mike. So Mike, do you have a base price to show up for your lawn mowing? Whatever the lowest price you would charge to drop the gate?
Usually $45 per cut.
Depending on what size of mower, it's going to vary, but you may be using a 22-inch push commercial, you may be using a 60-inch or 72-inch. Doesn't really matter for this conversation, but to mow, blow, and edge and stick edge, potentially depending on the market, what's the maximum of square footage? And this is fictitious, Mike. It doesn't have to be perfect. So by all means, guys, if you're watching this, do your own homework on this. Mike and I are just kind of wrapping back and forth the process. But Mike, what's the largest area per square footage that you would cover for $45?
We'd probably max at, like, this is smaller, so 3,000 square feet. Let's do that.
Okay. All right. So based on that, $45 an hour, and I'm going to divide that by your $75 per hour. So I'm going to tell you, Mike, 0.6 man hours is the maximum time you can take. Now you might be like, Mike, I have no idea what 0.6 man hours is. So I'm going to do a little equation here for us just to see what that is. And that is 36 minutes. So we're always basing our matrices in Copilot or any other softwares I'm aware of on one person. But Mike, for one person to mow, blow, and edge the 3,000 square feet, and that's probably getting the equipment off the truck in the beginning too, and whatever else they need to do. What's the maximum amount of minutes that you would give them? Now the maximum is 36, but how long do you think it would take your guys and girls based on your company?
Probably 20 minutes tops.
Okay. So That is 0.33 man hours. So thank you for using some even math and that put me on the spot here to calculate that out. But what we've got now is between 1 and 3,000 square feet. We're charging $45. It's going to take 20 minutes for one guy or girl to do that. 0.33 man hours. And based on that $59.98, Mike, that we came up with, it's costing you $19.79. So on the base price, you're making $25.21 here. And your profit percentage is 56% net, as long as everything goes to plan. Now, remember we said it was only 20%. So people are like, why doesn't the math add up? Well, we've overridden the maximum budgeted time. So traditionally, you're going to find, you probably see this a lot with the Augusta franchises, the most profitable lawns are probably the smaller ones. And we make the most amount of money on our base price. Now, we could stretch this out to a whole acre, but for today's conversation, I'm going to say every 1,000 square feet over 3,000 is X amount of time. So if you said, Mike, it's going to take, let's call it 5 minutes per 1,000 divided by 60, that's 0.08 man hours. So based on your rate, Mike, you need to charge $6.25. It's taking you 6 minutes and it's costing you $5. So what we've done is created a blueprint. So we've gone in and now assumed what is the profit percentage. So Mike, if we're going through 10 or 15 services with you, or you're doing it yourself, this 20.02% should consistently work its way down the screen. And if it goes down to 3 to 4%, like, wait a minute, pump the brakes. Is this a loss leader? Have we purposely set this up, or do we need to go back and look at it? But the idea is we test it, we blueprint it, and then we drive it into the actual software like Copilot. Now, there's probably some naysayers here saying, well, I don't know how long it takes, which is okay. We can do a time-based system, Mike. So this example is going to be lawn mowing man minutes. And I did forget to put our custom field there. So our custom field on the first one is turf square footage. Our custom field here is literally lawn mowing man minutes. That's the variable, Mike. So as the expert, you're going to go in and look at it and go, well, how many minutes or hours do I think it's going to take? And Mike, you said that our minimum price to show up is $45. So everything up here is identical, but now it's time-based. So if I went in and said literally that times 60 minutes, so we have minutes, basically it's 19.8 minutes. So we'll round that up. So if you plugged into a form or some way of track that, and you said between 1 and 20 minutes, the system's going to calculate $45. It's still going to take the 20 minutes as it did up here, the 0.33, and it's costing $19.78. So what you've done is been able to evolve from your guesstimating to eventually production rate. Now it gets a little bit different on the bottom, Mike, here. It's every 1 minute over the 20 minutes, and 0.02 is 1 minute. You need to charge $1.50 a minute. So if 60 minutes is an hour, that makes sense if it's 75 an hour and it's costing $120, but you can see the profit percentage are the same. So that's how we would evolve into this. Now I'm going to show you in a minute how we take this data and actually get it into Copilot, the new matrices. But I want to show one more example. We've got a second here because now we've got a product-based and a labor-based situation. So mulch installation is going to be our custom field. That's our variable bed square footage. So let's say we're going to do a 3-inch depth. So an industry standard is 3 inches would cover 100 square feet. And if we remember, our production rate for 1 yard of mulch is 1 hour for one person. So from 1 to 100 square feet is $65. Actually, so it's going to be, on this example, 1 hour times our 75. So every yard we're charging $75 in labor. It takes us an hour and it's costing us 59. So that 20% is there. And then in this example, every 100 square feet over the first 100 is another $75 an hour and $59.98. So this is the same exact process I used in my company, Mike, where Paul that ran the company and the estimator, Paul originally did the system. He had never cut a lawn commercially. He was a commercial pesticide applicator for a golf course. And within about a week or two, Paul was able to take this data and literally do HOA bids of 40 or 50,000 within 50 or 60 bucks of what was in my head over 25 years, because we created a plug and play system. But we have the guaranteed, or at least the projected profit margin and the budgeted time that now we can do against the actual time. And the final solution here is we're going in, well, Mike, we can't possibly standardize shrub trimming or something like that, could we? Well, we can. With time and motion studies, there's industry standards we use, but you can do your own. But we can do a small shrub, less than 3 feet, a medium shrub, 3 to less than 6, and a large, 6 to 10. Same idea, Mike, but what we would do is put in the budgeted hours. So I'm going to use these fictitious so I don't give the whole show away here, but let's just say it's 5 minutes for a small shrub. We plug that in. So every shrub we kick in, it kicks out $6.25. Let's say that we're doing a large shrub at 1 point, or a medium shrub at 0.16 man hours. So every medium shrub has got to be at least $12. And then every large shrub, let's put that at 0.3. Next, kicking out at $22.50. Now we can go out and do linear feet of hedgerow both sides with or without a ladder. But the idea here is now this is going to be all stuck in your software, such as Copilot. So it's a lot to digest, Mike, but I'm going to pop this over and kind of put some context to this. But do you have any questions before I hop into that?
No, that's excellent. We're coming in on the hour limit, but go ahead. Yeah, let's kind of see the end result of all of this information, but now in the software and hopefully a little simpler than having to create Excel documents all the time for people.
Yep. So real quickly, once you have this sheet, the top 5 lines here on our mowing, the 3045.33 and the 1975 are literally going in now in Copilot. And I know this is going into beta, Mike, but literally it goes into these top 5 lines right here. And then the bottom 5 cells here are going to line up with these bottom 5 cells. Once we've done and blueprinted it, we've confirmed our profit projections. We're going to actually go in and plug that into Copilot. And if you remember in the beginning, Mike, I said, what was it per unit? What was the custom field? And what was the calculation? On the far left, we've given you those data points. If you watch back through this again, we have it. And eventually on the back end of Copilot, we're going to be able to create an estimate with the custom field, the quantity, the rate, either 1 visit or 30 visits, total cost, budgeted hours, total budgeted hours, cost, and projected profit and profit margin. So time does not evolve that, but basically I was going to mock out a version to build out those services. But really in its simplest form, Mike, we're plugging this data in once we've confirmed it with our financial numbers. And when we go to schedule those jobs in Copilot now, we have a price, a budgeted time, and a cost before profit on the labor, product with product markup, and potentially equipment being allocated in the software.
And ultimately, I think what's so awesome about all of this is the fact that it's going to help create a system in the business for the office people to be able to actually get pricing, for the estimator to be able to actually give accurate pricing without you as the owner having to be there, and leaning on the system instead of your 10 years of experience behind your eyes to determine how long a job is going to take, to determine how many yards of mulch it's going to take, and making a more repeatable process.
Absolutely. It's a rinse, repeat, non-emotional. And now you as a business owner are not the bottleneck to growth. Anybody in the office, call center, or virtual assistant can sell. And if we're going in and downselling to our core gateway services over the phone, it's a rinse and repeat system. And hopefully we can build matrices around the other services we're going to upsell to build that client ticket value. I know you talked about at the summit, same exact thing we did at Callahan's Lawn Care, and it made it rinse and repeat system. But once we have these matrices, now we have non-emotional numbers to base the actual time with. And we can raise those prices we need to, or leave them the same.
Awesome. Well, Mike, I really appreciate your time. And I know that as we build out job costing and price matrices over the next month or so and launch it, you'll be a big part of that Simple Growth. And for everyone that's listening, you join Copilot and you need help building these models and understanding what these numbers are. Simple Growth is the one-stop shop. I highly recommend them. What's so beautiful is that Mike gives the information away, but then it's a matter of if it's still overwhelming, just have someone else do it. You're probably much more likely to get a better bang for your buck spending time on your business than trying to figure out Excel and numbers and all these spreadsheets. I do recommend Simple Growth a lot, and just once it's set up, you can then use it for the rest of your business's life and really make it worth its while. So thank you so much for your time, Mike. I know in the future you'll be making some tutorials and help guides for the users of Copilot, but just want to take a moment and say thank you for all your work and giving out to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Take a look. I know we've been a little shy of pumping a lot of content in the user group, but we will be going in there with Mike's permission and providing just literally value how to do it. Because in the mindset of abundance, this is something that you need. And I wish I had in the early days. And now it's available through technology. So we'll be out there to be your resource. And Mike, thanks for everything you're doing and raising the level of professionalism in this industry.